Real stories of werewolves, of Dogman from history, from your emails, illustrated and animated with the democratizing magic of machine learning AI. Welcome to Scary Stories.
Talking werewolf answered the door. Welcome to Scary Stories. This time we've gathered together a collection of werewolf and dogman stories originally reported by the late great Linda Godfrey in her book Monsters Among Us. There's a link in the description of this video to get yourself a copy of the book if you want to follow along, and I think they give our channel some kind of percentage if you use that link. I'd like to start the episode off with one of the strangest true dogman or werewolf stories of all time. It comes from the section entitled Michigan Dog at the Door, which is inside Chapter 3, which is entitled They Walk Among Us. This story goes back around 100 years to the 1920s, when much of Michigan was still pretty rural. This happened in the downriver area of Rockwood by the Huron River, just a little south of Detroit. Of course, we think of urban life when we think of Detroit and Michigan these days. But as Linda Godfrey points out in the book, Rockwood is just a 15-minute drive to Grosse Isle, which is the setting of upright walking dog stories stretching back to French immigrants in the 1700s. Does that mean that Dogman was a natural animal in that area in those days? Or is this an example of the French bringing their werewolves with them? I certainly mean that culturally. I'm not sure if I mean it literally. I mean, that would be one explanation, that there really are werewolves within that population, and that wherever they go, so do werewolves. That's if you believe in shapeshifters and all that stuff, and of course I'm not saying you should, but it would explain some things. Such as this particular story that we're leading off with. It was brought to Linda Godfrey's attention in 2014 by the granddaughter of the man who had originally claimed this happened to him personally. So imagine it's the 1920s, and you got one of them newfangled horseless carriages. You're gassed up and zooming along at speeds that can sometimes approach 30 miles an hour, at least when you're going downhill. Bugs are splattered all over your driving goggles, when suddenly you get a flat tire. Now back in those days, even in Michigan, which was becoming the car capital of the country, you were pretty much out of luck if you got a flat tire in the country. So this woman's grandfather, who was still a young man at the time, got out of his car and he started walking. When he saw a creepy, lonely old farmhouse out there in the night, looking lived in, he walked up and knocked on the door. Now, I'm not clear what he was knocking on the door to ask for, but that was how Godfrey related the family legend. I don't know if he was looking for a spare tire or an air pump or a jack or what, but he went up and banged on that door. Soon there was the sound inside of someone coming to the door, and it creaked open. Standing just inside, the woman's grandpa did not see another man, or a woman for that matter. He saw what he described as a dog standing up there on his hind legs, looking back out at him. And then, before the man could say a single word, this dogman or wolfman or werewolf or whatever it was, in perfect English, it told the man sternly,
"Go, or I will kill you."
And that's what he did. He left. I'm not sure where he left to go to or what happened to his car, but that's the story. He claims he knocked on a farmhouse door in Michigan in the 1920s, and he was threatened and chased off by a dog that stood on its hind legs and spoke perfect English. Now, there are a lot of ways one can interpret that description, obviously. A normal dog couldn't speak to him in English even if it wanted to. The mouth is just not shaped correctly for the English language, beyond a few words that dogs are famous for saying, like bow and wow, for instance. Dogs can sometimes threaten you with their gaze or with their growling, but not so much with their ability to turn a phrase. So this was someone or something that literally spoke English in the way you or I do, with our mouths. Then I don't see how it could have been a dog, or at least not entirely a dog. Still, I tried to make it look like a dogman might look if it spoke English and said,
"Go, or I will kill you."
I do wonder, however, if the man saw something more like a human, like a werewolf with a mouth closer to our mouths. Alternatively, I wonder if it was some kind of psychic episode, like maybe the grandpa heard that wolf-headed man's intentions, and maybe the creature's mouth never even moved at all. Maybe it was all in the head, you know? Linda Godfrey says that some people who study wolves, and I mean ordinary wolves, say that they might have some kind of psychic something going on. If wolves don't actually have psychic abilities, then they must have intense powers of concentration and an ability to extrapolate in their thinking, to guess what humans and others might do next. It's undeniable that this would be a great skill for a hunter to have. So maybe nature really has given wolves an ability to sense things that the rest of us can't, or at least can't as well as wolves do. So what do you think this lady's grandpa really saw back in the 1920s? It was too early for it to have been a rubber mask, although I guess a taxidermist might have been able to make a kind of a wolf head mask for you that could look pretty real if only seen for a few seconds. It might have been the farmer's scare away the city folk mask for all we know, but the account never mentions the figure wearing any clothing. It just says it was a big dog that stood up and spoke. If you think you can figure this one out, please leave us a comment letting us know what you're thinking. We've got a number of other stories just as interesting from this Linda Godfrey book, Monsters Among Us, coming up in a second. But first I want to thank a very special man. This episode's executive producer, James Fleming. James became a channel member after the passing of his beloved woman, who had been a channel member previously. Obviously, this is a different kind of a guy, and we were honored to have gotten to know him a little. He's going in for surgery, and so we're praying for him. If any of you are so inclined, please add to the chorus. If that isn't your style, please consider sending positive thoughts and vibrations his way, as James Fleming is one of the good guys. Good luck in there, man. We're all pulling for you. And we hope that the best possible outcome is what happens for you. Thank you, James Fleming. And now here's another true Linda Godfrey story from the book Monsters Among Us. Welcome back to Scary Stories, Monsters Among Us. She's got some truly weird Hollywood werewolf stories in it that I never heard before, and I really wanted to illustrate and share some of these supposedly true urban werewolf stories with you guys. Now, throughout the beginning of this book, Godfrey spends a lot of time going into the fact that there are all sorts of tunnels under Los Angeles and that part of California. There's a subway system that was entirely dug out and then abandoned, for one thing. There are also legends of far older tunnels built by a people that the natives called the Lizard People. Now, before YouTube bans my video, that doesn't mean the people were lizards. It means that was the name of that clan. They identified with lizards, according to legend. I don't know how much of that is legend or fact, and unlike Godfrey, I'm not 100% certain it matters either way. She's seeing these sightings as being of creatures separate from humans, who need a habitat near where they've been sighted. But what if these are not dogmen? What if these are what she calls morphers? What if they're werewolves and not dogmen? Then the habitat they would sleep in would be the apartment next to yours, not some ancient tunnel system underground. I'll give you some examples of her Los Angeles werewolf stories, and you tell me if these are dogman sightings, werewolf sightings, or some other third thing. Let's start it off with the Tessa Dick werewolf story, or a dogman story if you think so, you decide. Tessa is the widow of the great science fiction visionary author Philip K. Dick, and this story happened shortly after her husband's untimely passing at the age of 53 in 1982. Tessa was attending college at Chapman University at the time. She was 28 years old when this happened. While driving her car, she stopped at a red light in El Modena in Orange County. As she sat waiting for the light to change, Tessa says she saw a big black limo roll up next to her, with its tinted windows up. It was a warm day and Tessa had no air conditioning in her car, so her windows were down. Philip K. Dick unfortunately did not become rich and famous until after he was gone. Most of that money went to his children, and Tessa had to fend for herself. While she watched, the back seat window of the limo rolled down, and she found herself looking into the vehicle at a dark canine, which resembled a German shepherd to some degree. She could see the well-groomed creature's head, but not its body. Being an animal lover, Tessa smiled at the dog, and she said the intelligent-looking beast smiled back at her. She thought to herself that the owner of that limo was lucky to have such a beautiful dog. But then something unexpected happened. Just as the light was turning green, The dog, or whatever it was, casually put its arm up on the window to rest it. Although as dark as the rest of him, the arm was human, not canine. It ended in a human hand, not a dog paw. Tessa was stunned and looked up to find the canine-headed man making an expression back at her, which she describes as a smirk. He seemed to be enjoying her shocked expression. The arm had an elbow and a shoulder like a human, and it was covered in very fine black fur, like a dog's front leg. The hand, however, appeared to be hairless from what she could briefly see. If it was wearing any clothing, she didn't notice it from her angle. Tessa says she was not frightened, but she was Philip K. Dick's widow, so she must have become used to fantastic visions. I like to think that this was Anubis himself come to let her know that Phil was being accommodated in fashion in the afterlife. As the light changed to green and they both drove away, Tessa no longer felt the owner of that limo was the dog's master. She felt the dog itself must have owned that limo. Now, does that sound like a Dogman story? Or does that sound like a werewolf story? Well, here's another one. This happened in MacArthur Park, the one they wrote that famous song about. You know, the one where it's melting in the dark, as Donna Summer and Richard Harris sang in the previous century. In fact, the song was only written a handful of years before this next event took place in 1972. A woman named Mary May gave this report to Linda Godfrey 42 years later in 2014. She's supposed to be a former actress, and I did put the name in IMDb. I found a few possibilities, but no photos for any of the women. So Mary was out for a romantic walk with her then-boyfriend, and they wandered into the park from its entrance on Alvarado and 6th Street just as the sun was setting. As the couple walked south into the park, from the west to their right came a figure running fast, in a manner that for some reason frightened the witness Mary. She pulled back a little, hoping the running figure would pass them by without paying them any attention and ruining the mood. In fact, the figure turned a bit to the right as it passed them and began heading in the direction of Wilshire Boulevard to its right and directly in front of the witness. As it ran, she saw it had the head of a wolf. The sighting was brief, and she failed to make note of what kind of clothing it had on or if it even had any on. She thinks it had shoes, but she isn't sure, because her eyes were focused on the tall pointed ears and the long wolf snout sitting up on the shoulders of this rushing fellow. As she watched, the creature or man leaped a park bench as though it were nothing, and then he ran off heading into a tunnel which passes underneath Wilshire Boulevard and out of their sight. She never mentioned it to her boyfriend because she wanted to get back to their private time, so she never really knew if he even noticed the same thing that she had. Godfrey at this point speaks again about the possibility that the creature was heading to some underground tunnel system, but from what I can see on Google Maps, it just looks like a way to cut through from one side of the park to the other, where there's a lake located. Maybe there is or was a secret door to the mysterious and possibly partially mythical Los Angeles underworld in that underpass. Sort of like in this next and final true Hollyweird Dogman story for today. This one took place in Torrance, in a small outdoor shopping mall with a laundromat in it, back in the 1980s. A woman who was a girl at the time said that her mother had bought her and her older brother a ball, and they got permission to go behind the laundromat to this area that seemed empty of cars to play with their new ball. Her brother would throw the ball high up in the air and she would try to catch it. One time it got away from her and rolled to this back alcove area, set a bit apart from the rest. As she got the ball all the way back in the corner, the girl heard a noise behind her and turned around to find the shock of her life. There was some kind of a metal door in the sidewalk, and out of it had sprung a very angry man, asking her what all the noise was about. She'd been told never to speak to strangers, so the girl stood there terrified and frozen, with her brother off beyond this strangely dressed man. He was wearing clothes that seemed to be from another time. Suddenly, the odd, old-fashioned looking man began saying, "Oh no, not now," and acting as though he were having some kind of an attack. The girl claims he called her by her first name of Jennifer, which she had never told him. And then, he became a hairy-faced werewolf in front of her eyes. Her brother, who was twice the girl's age, distracted the werewolf climbing out of the metal doorway in the ground long enough for his sister to make it past him. Then both of them ran around to the front of the laundromat, leaving their prized new ball behind with the creature. The two ran into the laundromat shouting at the adults that it was time to evacuate, that a werewolf was coming after them. And the adults found it quite amusing. She claims her brother admits that he saw what he saw, but he won't go on the record saying so. I wonder what she saw, and she claims she does too. Years later, she went back and saw that they had completely redone the back of the shopping center, so that there is no more mysterious metal door in the middle of the sidewalk, for whatever weird reason. She still had the creeps until she got back out of there, though. If a place spooks you once, it's likely always going to put you on edge whenever you return. So those were 3 weird dog-headed people sightings in the Los Angeles area. But what were those sightings of, really? Were they dogmen? Were they werewolves? Were they something else that you'd only find out there in La La Land? Could they have been hoaxes or people wearing masks? Magicians performing tricks in public? If you have any theories about any of these 3 strange cases tonight, please leave your ideas in the comments. And if you would like to read more about these true stories, they're in Chapter 2, Liminal Los Angeles, of Linda Godfrey's book Monsters Among Us. We've got a link to get yourself a copy, which recently has become less expensive in price, which is in our description for this video. If you use that link, you help this channel out, so we thank you in advance. And speaking of thanks, here comes Bigfoot to thank this episode's executive producer. Biggie? Melissa Kutch, or Melissa Kutchi. She's always nice and she's never putchy. I have no idea what I'm talking about. You try rhyming everyone's name, okay? So we're thanking Melissa tonight because she's a PayPal Club member who lost her email but kept paying her dues. I have to put together all the links to the 3 months of episodes she's missed. Secret members only episodes, I mean. And then I think she has to contact PayPal, but I don't know how she can't access her email. Does anyone know if I can tell PayPal her new email and help her out? Her email was so high security that it won't let her reset her password. We're sorry that you lost your phone, Melissa, and all these crappy things happen as a result. We hope your luck is great from here on out, though. And we dedicate this episode to you. Thanks, MK. Welcome to Scary Stories. This time I've got a little golden nugget of a story that I really like, and believe it or not, it's another one from California. This one is called the California Car Jumper. The year is 1990. A woman in her 40s is driving home toward Livermore, California, from her job in Fremont. She has chosen to take Highway 84, which normally was a nice drive through country farmland that took her a half hour. On this particular night, however, a fog has taken over the countryside, making it hard to see very far in front of herself. As a result, the lady has to drive slow, just to make sure she's staying on the road, and not ending up in a ditch. As the drive stretched on longer than usual, the encroaching darkness combined with the weather to make visibility next to zero. Now, I can't tell you this lady's name because I don't even know it. She was a professional woman from a professional family, an accountant, an HR director, a Spanish teacher, and she never wanted her name linked to the strange things that were about to happen to her on that foggy, mysterious night. In fact, her family later kidded her about this unmercifully, since things like this aren't supposed to happen to straight-laced people. Although it was hard for the lady to make out much in the pea soup fog, She could make out the red light up ahead, and consequently slowed her vehicle down to a complete stop. The very instant her car ground to a halt. This creature landed on her car hood that was unlike anything she had ever seen, or would ever see again. Literally inches in front of her face, she saw the face of a dangerous, agitated, feral, carnivorous, wolf-like canine. And yet, the arms it landed on ended in hands, not dog or wolf paws. The woman didn't know what she was looking at, and she didn't know where it had come from. The fog had successfully hidden it from her view until it crash-landed directly in front of her windshield. So the woman's ordinary drive home had become difficult with the weirdly thick fog, and now it had turned into a full-on scene from a horror movie. She was alone in the middle of vast farmland in the dark, just inches away from something that sure looked exactly like a werewolf from a Hollywood motion picture. I can imagine she must have been quite frightened. The woman was quoted later saying that it was not an expletive-deleted man, and it was not an expletive-deleted dog. So what was the expletive-deleted thing? I'm sure this question was near the top of the list for this woman, as she looked into the eyes of that California Dogman, and it looked right back into her eyes too. Rather than wait to see what the animal man would do next, the resourceful woman simply slammed her foot down on the gas, and the shift in momentum gave the creature no option other than to leap to its own safety. The woman kept her foot on that gas and she never looked back. She also never took that route home again either. Do you think that story sounds true? Well, you should, because it is. You can find it in this book by the late great Linda Godfrey entitled Monsters Among Us. We've got a link in our description to snag this book if you'd like to read more about this and dozens of other strange cryptid encounters. If you use that link, we get a commission and you're helping the channel out. Speaking of helping the channel out, here comes Bigfoot to tell us about today's executive producer, Biggie. He's never off and he's always on. He's nobody's fool, John Carnagan. Please join me in thanking tonight's executive producer, John Carnagan, who recently joined our secret PayPal subscribers club, which you too can join at peterbernard.com. John gets to see our secret uncensored members-only stories, of which we do 4 new ones per month. If you don't want to join us through PayPal, you can join our YouTube channel members club and get the same perks. Here to tell you about all of this is our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
scary stories.